The chamber buzzed with a strange silence, not of peace, but of anticipation. Every seat in the wide, circular hall was filled with delegates from alien species, some towering and serpentine, others squat and thick-skinned, still others with features so alien they defied quick description. In the center of the chamber stood the human representative, Donovan Blake, a wiry man with quick eyes and a sharp, often unsettling, smile. Flanking him was an alien translator, Garrick, whose blue-tinted scales shimmered faintly under the chamber's soft lighting. "You're sure this will work?" Garrick murmured as they stepped toward the central podium. Blake smirked. "Oh, not at all. That's half the fun," Garrick hissed, which was his species' equivalent of a sigh. "You realize they're expecting fear. They want you to grovel, or at least show a bit of humility." "That's precisely why I won't," Blake said. His voice carried a confidence that made Garrick both envious and deeply uncomfortable. As the two approached the podium, a towering figure seated in one of the high chairs raised a clawed hand. The crowd stilled. This was Carvanor, one of the Tribunal's most senior members, whose obsidian-black carapace reflected the chamber's light in jagged glints. His deep voice resonated through the chamber. Human representative Donovan Blake, Carvanor intoned, his alien mouth forming the words in a distorted, yet comprehensible, accent. "You stand before this tribunal to explain your species' continued expansion into disputed territories. How do you plead?" Blake exchanged a quick glance with Garrick, who gave a subtle nod. Then he stepped forward and spread his arms wide. "Well," Blake began, "first of all, it's lovely to see you all again. Carvanor, those facial mandibles are looking sharp, been working out." A murmur rippled through the chamber. Carvanor's mandibles flexed slightly and his voice dropped an octave. "This is no time for levity, human." "No time for levity?" Blake repeated, his tone mock horrified. "Carvanor, my friend, when is there a better time? We've got a room full of species who could crush me like a twig, all waiting to pass judgment. If I can't joke now, I'm afraid I'll never get the chance." Garrick closed his eyes briefly. "What did I just say?" he muttered under his breath. The murmur grew louder, but now it carried a hint of confusion. Carvanor leaned forward, his mandibles clicking audibly. "Your confidence is noted. Yet confidence alone does not explain the encroachments into our agreed zones." Blake shrugged. "Confidence, humor, call it what you will. But the truth is, we humans aren't doing anything out of malice. We're curious. You might even say we're excited. And when we get excited, we sometimes forget to check all the maps." This drew a few sharp chittering sounds, which Garrick recognized as laughter from one of the species seated on the upper tiers. Carvanor, however, did not appear amused. "You are admitting negligence, then?" "Negligence," Blake repeated. "I wouldn't put it that way. Let's say, enthusiasm without caution." "And you believe," Carvanor said, "that your enthusiasm justifies the disruption you have caused to our order?" Blake stepped closer to the edge of the podium. "Justifies? Not exactly. I'm just here to say we don't mean harm. We're not looking to upset anyone. We're here because we want to learn, to understand, and—" A voice interrupted from the side. It belonged to a smaller alien, whose translucent skin showed the faint pulse of greenish blood beneath. "You claim you mean no harm, yet your actions suggest otherwise. How can we trust words from a species known for its impulsiveness?" Blake turned to face the speaker and gave an easy smile. "Impulsive, sure. I'll give you that. We humans are kind of like kids in a candy store when it comes to the galaxy. But, hey, who hasn't had a moment where they grabbed an extra candy bar at the checkout? That doesn't mean you're evil. It just means you've got a sweet tooth." This drew more laughter, some genuine, some nervous. The translucent alien narrowed its eyes. "A poor analogy, human." Blake raised his hands in mock surrender. "Fair enough. What I'm saying is we're new at this. Maybe we've stumbled. But it's not malice, it's growing pains. You were all new once, too, right?" A heavier alien near the back, its body covered in thick fur, rumbled. "We were not so reckless." "Well, congratulations," Blake said with a half bow. "You're clearly more mature than we were at your age. But now that we're here, we can either spend all our time pointing fingers, or we can sit down and figure out how to make this work." Garrick cleared his throat. "Donovan." "Not now, Garrick," Blake said over his shoulder. He leaned into the podium, making eye contact with as many tribunal members as possible. "The truth is, we humans don't have it all figured out. But we're not monsters. We're not your enemies. We're just a species that saw a big, wide galaxy and thought, hey, what's over there? Maybe we knocked over a vase or two on our way in, but we didn't do it on purpose. And we'd really like to stick around and help clean up. There was a pause. Carvenor's mandibles twitched as if he were chewing over Blake's words. You ask for understanding, yet you offer no tangible reparations. Reparations, Blake said, eyebrows raised. Sure, we'll talk reparations. You want some rare metals? Some tech we've been working on? We're happy to share. But before we start signing checks, let's at least agree on what the damage was, yeah? Otherwise, we're just throwing rocks in the dark. The translucent alien snorted, a sound that translated to disdain. How convenient for you. Not convenience, Blake replied. Practicality. You want this sorted, I want this sorted. We can keep shouting at each other, or we can sit down with a bottle of something strong and hammer it out like adults. The heavy-furred alien chuckled. A bottle, you say? You humans do have strange negotiation tactics. Blake grinned. Strange, sure, but effective. Come on, let's break the ice before we break each other's patience. Carvenor tapped a claw against the armrest of his seat. This meeting is not a tavern, human. And yet he paused, mandibles flexing. There may be value in what you propose. Humor, indeed, is an unorthodox strategy. Unorthodox is our specialty, Blake said. What do you say, Carvenor? I'll bring the whiskey if you bring an open mind. There was a moment of silence, and then, against all odds, Carvenor's mandibles moved in what might have been a faint smile. Proceed with your unconventional approach, human. For now. Blake turned back to Garrick, who was shaking his head but couldn't hide a faint smirk. Told you it would work, Blake whispered. The meeting adjourned with less animosity than it began, but still no clear consensus. Blake and Garrick left the central chamber, their voices lowering as they walked through the long, echoing corridor toward their designated quarters. You're lucky Carvenor didn't have you ejected after that stunt, Garrick said, his sharp blue scales catching the soft light of the corridor's overhead fixtures. These aren't negotiators. They're leaders. They don't care for jokes. Blake shrugged, hands stuffed casually into the pockets of his diplomatic suit. They're leaders, sure, but they're still people. People love a good laugh. They just don't know it yet. I can assure you Carvenor isn't people as you put it, Garrick muttered. He hissed in frustration and stopped mid-stride, turning to face Blake. And why the whiskey joke? Do you even have whiskey? I always have whiskey, Blake said with a sly grin. It's a matter of principle. If the conversation turns south, you pull out the bottle. Works every time. Humans. Garrick rolled his eyes and resumed walking, though his pace was more deliberate now, as though trying to channel his annoyance into something productive. I don't understand how your species even got this far with methods like that. Blake chuckled and clapped him on the shoulder. Because we're adaptable, my friend. We know when to break the rules. Your definition of adaptability is unique, Garrick replied, though his tone softened. He knew arguing wouldn't change Blake's approach. It never did. As they approached the entrance to their quarters, a small figure emerged from a nearby alcove. It was slender and smooth-skinned, its flesh shimmering with faint shades of green and gold. Its wide, bright eyes locked onto Blake, and the creature emitted a series of quick, trilling clicks. Ah, right on time, Blake said, flashing a warm smile. Tia, isn't it? The alien Tia nodded slowly. I've come to escort you to the Cultural Exchange Center. Your approach has intrigued some of us. Cultural exchange? Garrick raised one scaly brow. I wasn't informed of this. It is not an official session, Tia replied, her voice melodic though edged with caution. But certain tribunal members are curious about how you humans operate. They wish to observe your methods in a less formal environment. Blake clapped his hands together. Sounds perfect. I've been meaning to show you folks a few human pastimes. Maybe some card games, a little music. And perhaps you could also answer some questions, Tia interjected. Certain practices of your kind seem contradictory. There is interest in understanding these contradictions. Contradictions are our bread and butter, Blake said. Lead the way, Tia. The Cultural Exchange Center was a large, open room filled with artifacts and displays from countless civilizations. Holographic projections of alien art hovered in the air, interspersed with physical objects, ornate tools, carved statues, and intricate textiles. A small group of tribunal representatives had already gathered there, their colorful robes and varied body shapes creating a visual mosaic. As soon as Blake entered, a stocky alien with reddish fur approached him. Human, the alien rumbled. I am Fexer of the Varn. I must ask, why do you speak so lightly of serious matters? Ah, Fexo. Blake greeted him as if they were old friends, though they'd never spoken before. I don't speak lightly, I speak efficiently. If you get people smiling, you get them talking. And if they're talking, you've got a chance to find common ground. Fexo tilted his large head, his bright eyes narrowing. So you manipulate with humor. Manipulate? Nah, that's too strong a word. Blake waved the comment off. Let's call it persuasion through levity. When you're laughing, you're more likely to listen. Tia stepped forward. Is this why your species is so disjointed? Because you rely on laughter rather than discipline? Garrick, who had been hanging back, couldn't hold back a short hiss of laughter. She has a point. Blake ignored him and directed his reply to Tia. It's not an either-or thing. We have plenty of discipline when we need it. But when you're dealing with other species, rigid discipline can sometimes come off as hostility. Humor lightness breaks down walls. It's not a weakness. It's a shortcut to understanding. Another alien, tall and insectoid, clattered its mandibles and leaned down to Blake's level. Your methods sound inefficient. Laughter does not build fleets or organize defenses. No, it doesn't, Blake admitted. But it can stop fleets from clashing in the first place. Look, I'm not saying humans are perfect, far from it. But we're pretty good at figuring out what other people care about, and we use that to keep things from boiling over. Fexa grunted. Then show us. Demonstrate this laughter and its power. Blake hesitated for the first time, glancing around the room. He wasn't entirely sure what they expected. You want me to tell a joke? Yes, Tia said. A human joke. Blake rubbed the back of his neck. Okay, so a human, a Varn, and a Threxian walk into a bar. Garrick groaned. This is going to end poorly. No interruptions, Blake said, holding up a hand. So they walk into a bar. The bartender looks at them and says, "What is this, a delegation meeting?" He delivered the punchline with a wide grin and looked around, hopeful. There was silence. Then Fexo scratched his chin thoughtfully. I do not understand. It's a play on context, Blake said. Because a delegation meeting and a bar have nothing to do with each other, so the idea of them overlapping is funny. Tia tilted her head. Perhaps the humor is lost in translation. Do you have another? Blake felt himself sweat a little. Let me think. Okay. Why did the human refuse dessert at the intergalactic banquet? Why? Asked the insectoid alien, leaning in. Because they heard the pudding was out of this world. Blake spread his arms, waiting for a reaction. This time, a few of the aliens began to emit sounds that might have been laughter. Fexo's shoulders shook, though his expression remained serious. This pudding is humorous. I understand now. Garrick stared in disbelief. I don't believe it. You actually got them to laugh. Blake turned back to Tia. See? Laughter's contagious. And when you're laughing, you're not fighting. Tia regarded him with a careful gaze. Perhaps there is more to your methods than we initially believed. But this, pudding humor must be further analyzed. Blake grinned. Feel free. I've got a million more where that came from. The following day, Blake and Garrick found themselves summoned to a smaller meeting chamber deep within the Tribunal's sprawling complex. It was far less imposing than the main hall, no towering seats or piercing stairs, just a round table with a few chairs. Around it sat Tia, Fexer, and a new face, Zell, a tall, sinewy figure from a species known for their strategic minds. Zell's sharp, silvery skin seemed to shimmer with every subtle movement, and her calm gaze fixed on Blake as he entered. I've heard much about your approach, she said without preamble. Your humor is curious. Blake grinned as he sat down. Curious is good. Curious means you're thinking. That's where understanding starts. Zell tilted her head slightly. Perhaps. But understanding must be followed by trust. And trust is not built on clever words alone. Absolutely, Blake agreed. Trust comes from seeing someone's true character over time. From watching how they act when things get tough. He glanced at Garrick, who was now seated beside him. That's why we're here? To show you that we're not just talk. Tia nodded but remained cautious. You speak often of your intentions. Words are easy. Actions are what matter. Then let's act, Blake said. He leaned forward, resting his arms on the table. What do you need from us? How can we help? Fexa's deep voice rumbled. You could begin by proving your reliability. There is a data relay on the outskirts of the station, one that has been offline for several cycles. The repair crews have been slow to respond. If you are so eager to show your goodwill, perhaps you can assist in restoring it. Blake turned to Garrick. You up for a field trip? Garrick sighed heavily. I suppose I have no choice. Blake grinned at the assembled aliens. There you go. We'll get that relay back online. Tia studied him, her expression unreadable. Very well. If you succeed, it may strengthen your position here. But know this, human, one task will not erase the skepticism surrounding your species. Blake stood and adjusted his jacket. Understood. But it's a start, isn't it? Zell watched him carefully, her silver features unreadable. It is. Go, then. Show us what humans can do. The data relay site was a stark contrast to the polished chambers of the Tribunal. Set on the edge of the station's outer ring, it was a vast, cluttered area of machinery and exposed circuitry. The relay itself was a massive cylindrical structure covered in intricate wiring, its central console blinking intermittently like a flickering star. Garrick frowned as they approached. This doesn't look promising. Whatever caused this relay to fail might be more than just a software glitch. Maybe, Blake said, crouching down next to the console. But we won't know until we dig in. He pulled out a small multi-tool from his jacket pocket, flicking it open with practiced ease. Garrick watched him skeptically. Do you even know what you're looking for? Garrick asked. Blake smirked. Not yet, but I'm pretty good at figuring things out as I go. That is not reassuring, Garrick muttered, though he moved to the other side of the console to inspect the wiring. The two of them worked in relative silence for a while, the only sounds being the hum of nearby machinery and the occasional spark of a misaligned circuit. Finally, Garrick spoke up. Why did you volunteer for this? Because it's an opportunity, Blake said without looking up. If we can show them we're willing to help, they might start seeing us as something more than a nuisance. Garrick made a low, thoughtful sound. You're not just doing this for laughs, then? Blake paused and glanced over at him. No, Garrick. The jokes are just a tool. What I really want is for them to understand that we're not the enemy. And maybe, just maybe, they'll realize we have something to offer. Garrick looked away, his scaled hands carefully reattaching a loose panel. You have a strange way of going about it. It's not about how you get there, Blake said. It's about where you end up. Before Garrick could respond, the console emitted a loud beep. Blake leaned closer, studying the small display. Okay, I think we're onto something. Let me see, Garrick said, moving to stand beside him. He examined the display and then tapped a few buttons. It's not fully operational, but the power lines are stabilizing. We just need to realign the data feeds. Great, Blake said. Show me how. Garrick hesitated, then pointed to a series of colored wires. Reconnect these in the correct sequence. I'll guide you. Blake followed Garrick's instructions, his hands steady as he worked. It wasn't long before the console emitted another beep, this time steadier and more rhythmic. The blinking lights on the relay smoothed out and the faint hum of the machinery grew more consistent. We did it, Blake said, grinning at Garrick. Not bad, eh? Garrick gave a small, grudging nod. Not bad. As they packed up their tools, Tia appeared, her green and gold skin shimmering in the station's dim lighting. She looked at the now-functioning relay and then back at the two of them. You succeeded, she said. There was a hint of surprise in her voice. Blake gave her a casual salute. Told you we get it done. Tia studied him for a moment, then said, perhaps there is more to you than words, human. This is a good start. Blake exchanged a quick look with Garrick before replying. A start is all we need. You'll see, Tia. We're not just here to talk, we're here to make things work. Without another word, Tia turned and walked back toward the station's core. Blake watched her go, then glanced at Garrick. Think she's warming up to us? Blake asked, a teasing edge in his tone. Garrick snorted. Don't push your luck, Blake. Blake laughed and clapped him on the back. Come on, Garrick. I've got a good feeling about this. Chapter 4, Laughter as a Weapon. Blake and Garrick were ushered into a larger chamber this time. The Tribunal had taken note of their success with the relay, and though skepticism still lingered, there was a shift in the air and openness to hear what they had to say. Zell, Tia, and Fexer. However, you must now explain why we should trust the motives behind your humor. Blake spread his hands, looking relaxed. Why? Because humor is about connection. It's a way of showing we're not so different. Take me and Garrick here. He gestured to his scaly counterpart. We're from completely different species with different ways of thinking. But when I crack a joke, no matter how bad it is, he gets it. Even if he doesn't laugh, he understands the intent. I wouldn't call it understanding, Garrick muttered under his breath. Blake smirked. See? Even his sarcasm proves my point. Zell leaned forward, her sharp silver features catching the light. Yet, this humor does not erase the tensions that brought you here, nor does it negate the consequences of your species' actions. You cannot simply jest your way out of responsibility. Nor would I want to, Blake replied, his tone steady. Look, I get that we've made mistakes. Humans don't have the cleanest track record. But if we're going to fix things, we need to start somewhere. And humor, levity, makes the conversation possible. It opens doors that might otherwise stay closed. Fexer's deep voice cut through the chamber. You claim humor opens doors. Show us, then. How would you use this levity to resolve a dispute? Blake exchanged a glance with Garrick, then turned back to Fexer. You've got a conflict on this station, right? Different factions competing for control of a resource, say a mining operation. Each side digs in their heels, won't budge. Now, if I step in, start cracking jokes about how stubborn they are, maybe they'll laugh. Not because the situation is funny, but because they recognize themselves in the humor. That moment of recognition, that's the start of understanding. And once you understand each other, you can start finding solutions. Zell narrowed her eyes. So you would mock them into cooperation. Not mock, Blake said quickly. Relate. There's a difference. I'm not here to make enemies. I'm here to show that even in the darkest times, we're still just people trying to figure things out. Humor reminds us of that. Tia's gaze softened slightly, though her voice remained firm. But how do you ensure this humor does not offend? Different cultures have different boundaries. Blake nodded. Fair point. That's where listening comes in. You have to know your audience. For example, if Garrick has a touchy subject, let's say he's sensitive about his tail. Garrick immediately looked up. I'm not sensitive about my tail. Sure you aren't, Blake said with a grin. But if you were, I wouldn't make jokes about it. The key is to find common ground. You joke about the things everyone can laugh at, not the things that cause pain. Humor should build bridges, not burn them. Fexer leaned back in his seat, his heavy frame shifting. And you believe this approach can prevent further hostilities? Blake's expression grew more serious. I do. When people laugh together, they see each other differently. They stop being enemies and start being something else. Maybe not friends, not right away, but at least something they can work with. Zell tapped a long, gleaming finger against the table. You speak confidently. Yet words alone will not convince us. The tribunal requires proof. Blake leaned forward, hands clasped in front of him. Then let me prove it. Let me sit down with two groups in conflict, any two, and see if I can shift the mood. I'm not saying I'll solve all their problems overnight, but I can show you the first steps. Give me that chance and you'll see what I mean. Tia exchanged a look with Zell and Fexer. The three seemed to deliberate silently before Zell finally spoke. Very well. We will arrange such a meeting. But understand this, human, your attempt will be closely observed. Should you fail, I won't fail, Blake said firmly. I might stumble, sure, but I won't fail. Garrick sighed and rubbed the ridge of his snout. This is going to be another disaster, isn't it? Blake clapped him on the back. Not a disaster, Garrick. A grand experiment. We're making history here. The session adjourned, and as the group filed out of the chamber, Blake turned to Garrick with a wide grin. So, think I got through to them? Garrick shook his head. If you did, it wasn't because of your jokes. Well, something's working, Blake said. And I'll keep it until they see we're not so bad after all. Garrick glanced at him, his expression skeptical but not entirely dismissive. You're stubborn. I'll give you that. Blake laughed. Stubbornness is one of our best traits. Come on, let's see what they've got lined up for this meeting. Maybe we can learn a thing or two. Chapter 5, A New Understanding. Blake and Garrick sat across the table from two of the most unlikely conversational partners imaginable. On one side was Mary, a representative of the thick-shelled Quentak people known for their fierce territorialism and strict adherence to their traditions. Across from her sat Rolvek, a lithe and shimmering member of the Viltari whose culture prized progress and expansion above all else. The two factions had been at odds for cycles over the control of a critical mining outpost, and previous talks had led to little more than shouting matches and a series of icy stalemates. Thank you for agreeing to meet, Blake began, his voice even and his hands flat on the table. I know this hasn't been easy, and I appreciate you giving me the chance to talk things out. Mary crossed her thick arms. You have 5 minutes, human. Speak wisely. Rolvek inclined his narrow head, his iridescent skin catching the room's overhead lights. This should be amusing. Let's hear your latest attempt at humor. Garrick sat quietly beside Blake, his scaly fingers drumming lightly on the table. He leaned toward Blake and muttered, they're not exactly in a cooperative mood. That's what I'm here to change, Blake whispered back. Then he turned his full attention to the two aliens in front of him. Let me start by asking a simple question. What do you both actually want from this mining outpost? Mary's voice was as heavy as her shell. We want it secured. The Quintac cannot allow a resource so close to our borders to fall into reckless hands. We must ensure it is managed responsibly. Rolvek's tone was lighter, though no less firm. We want to expand its production. The Voltari can bring advanced methods and greater yields. This benefits everyone if the Quintac would only step aside. Blake nodded slowly. So, Mary, you're worried about security. And Rolvek, you're focused on increasing output. Interesting. Mary's eyes narrowed. What's so interesting about that? Well, Blake said, leaning back, it sounds to me like you're not completely at odds. Mary, you're not against higher yields, right? You just want it done in a way that doesn't jeopardize your borders. Obviously, Mary said gruffly. And Rolvek, you're not trying to make the area less secure, are you? You just want to see its potential fully realized. Correct, Rolvek replied, though he still sounded wary. Blake grinned. See? You're already agreeing on something. That's progress. Garrick glanced at him. I wouldn't call it progress. Not yet, Blake said quietly. He turned back to the others. Let's try something. Imagine we're all on the same side and this is a problem we need to solve together. How would you do it? Mary snorted. Hypotheticals are pointless. Not always, Blake said lightly. Sometimes they help us see what's possible. Mary, if you had complete control over the outpost's security, what would you need from the Voltari to feel comfortable increasing production? Mary hesitated, her thick fingers tapping the table. I would require guarantees. A clear buffer zone, strict oversight, and perhaps some form of joint command. Interesting, Blake said. He turned to Rolvek. Would your people be willing to work under joint command if it meant a stable operation? Rolvek's thin mouth twisted. If it ensured uninterrupted production, we might consider it. Provided, of course, that the Quintac adhere to efficiency standards. Blake nodded. So you'd both be willing to work together under certain conditions. Mary shifted uncomfortably. That does not mean we trust them. I'm not asking you to trust them right now, Blake said. Trust takes time. But a partnership starts with a basic agreement. You need each other. Mary, your people can't manage both security and production at peak levels. Rolvek, your people can't guarantee stability without the Quintac's expertise in maintaining the region's safety. You're both better off working together than working against each other. Rolvek's shimmering brow furrowed. A compelling argument, but words are not enough. How do you propose we move forward? Blake leaned forward, his elbows on the table. Start small. Maybe a trial period, joint command for 6 months. Set clear roles, agree on protocols, and see how it goes. If it works, expand the arrangement. If it doesn't, well, you're no worse off than you are now. Mary considered this, her thick jaw tightening. A trial period might be acceptable. But only if the Voltari respect our boundaries. And only if the Quintac honor the production goals, Rolvek countered. Good, Blake said, holding up a hand before they could devolve into argument. You're both setting terms. That's the first step. Now, let's figure out what those terms look like. Garrick watched this exchange unfold, his skepticism slowly giving way to curiosity. Blake's lighthearted, easygoing demeanor hadn't vanished, but he was now guiding the conversation with precision, drawing out compromise without forcing it. Garrick leaned in and murmured, "How are you doing this?" Listening, Blake replied under his breath, "You should try it sometime." By the end of the hour, the room was quiet except for the steady hum of the overhead lights. Mary and Rolvek sat back in their chairs, no longer glaring at each other, and a tentative agreement, just the outlines of one, had taken shape. Blake exhaled and stood. This isn't a full solution, but it's a start. You've both got what you need to keep talking. I think you'll find that the more you work together, the easier this gets. Mary grunted. We shall see. Rolvek rose as well, his shimmering skin catching the light. You are unusual, human. But perhaps not without merit. Blake smiled. I'll take that as a compliment. As the two alien representatives left the room, Blake turned to Garrick. So? What do you think? Garrick folded his arms. I think you got lucky, but you did manage to keep them talking. Exactly, Blake said. Sometimes that's all it takes. Keep talking, keep laughing, and eventually you'll find a way forward. Garrick shook his head. You're incorrigible. Thanks, Blake said, clapping him on the shoulder. Let's go find some food. I'm starving after all this diplomacy.